Guys, check this out. Merry Christmas, everybody, and here's my review of Home Alone. I'm not the first one to say this, but Home Alone is one of my all-time favorite childhood movies and easily in my top favorite Christmas movies. I have to watch it at least once every Christmas or winter. This is a must for me, and if you are one of those people who doesn't like Home Alone, well, let's agree to disagree. Home Alone is directed by Chris Columbus, starring Macaulay Culkin, Catherine O'Hara, John Hurd, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, the late John Candy, and many, many other people. You guys know the plot of this movie. Kevin McAllister is a young kid, and he's kind of at odds with his family. His parents don't seem to like him, his siblings can't really stand him, and as they head off for their trip to Paris at the very last second, they leave him all by himself. And therefore, Kevin has to fend for himself against the two wet bandits that decide to break into his house on Christmas. This movie has meant a lot to many people over the years, myself included. I watched the VHS tape of this millions and millions of times every time Christmas came around. My mom and I would watch this almost religiously. There was just something about it that really grasped me. I guess maybe it was because of the kid lead, played by Macaulay Culkin, because I wanted to be that kind of kid. I think a lot of kids in the 90s wanted to be that way. Yes, I want to set up all these booby traps. I want to steal my brother's BB gun. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate how this movie doesn't hesitate to show him getting scared in certain situations. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's like a charming innocence about this movie that gets me every single time. It's really hard to articulate. I would say just watch the movie for yourself. As far as my own personal thoughts and my experiences, let's get right to it. I had a chance to watch this movie the other night, and thinking about it, since I mentioned the charming innocence earlier, I guess for starters, John Hughes had a huge hand in this movie, producer and the writer. If you're familiar with his work, he's had his hand in various projects like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. A lot of those films deal with childlike innocence and the loss of innocence and growing into adulthood and learning to fend for yourself when you get to a certain age. So if you look at his resume, it's not really surprising to me that this movie has some of that in here, particularly with Kevin McAllister, and how he actually is really clever and very smart, but yet he still is a kid and he acts like a kid. Sometimes in the right ways and sometimes in the not so right ways. It's exciting, it's funny, but it also has a really good sense of emotion underneath the surface. And Macaulay Culkin as Kevin McAllister, it's one of the best child performances ever put to film. I mean, it's no surprise coming from me. He's very charming and very likable in this movie, even though he's kind of a jerk.
Kevin, out of the room.
Hang up the phone and make me, why don't you?
Get upstairs.
I am upstairs, dummy.
If I said things like that to my parents, you wouldn't be seeing me come out of my room for days. But in fairness to him, his parents aren't really paying attention to him, and he's not exactly the most liked in his family, particularly with his siblings like Megan, Lenny, and then his brother Buzz, who's a complete jackass. Don't you know how to knock, Flynn Wad? Can I sleep in your room? I don't want to sleep on the hide-a-bed with Fuller. I wouldn't let you sleep in my room if you were growing on my ass. I don't know which is funnier, his brother telling him off or Kevin just backing up in shock. Oh really? You're completely helpless. Everyone has to do everything for you. You're what the French call les incompetents. What? And it all comes to a head when his brother eats all of the pizza that Kevin wanted, and there's a fight that breaks out, then his family seems to turn against him and they all want him out of the room. But I think that's really relatable because I think we've all experienced that in our youth and in our childhood. I know for myself, I have. When I grow up and get married, I'm living alone.
Did you hear me? I'm living alone! I'm living alone!
But evidently, Kevin's family sleeps in after a power outage, and they all break out in chaos trying to get their stuff together, and they leave Kevin behind as they take off for the airport. And everything seems to be okay, and then Kevin wakes up and sees that he's all alone. I made my family disappear. That was me when I woke up on the day that I realized I was going to see Force Awakens 5 years ago. But then as the film goes on, he starts to realize that this may not be the exact ideal situation that he wanted all along. Because at certain moments, even though, like I said, he's very clever and he finds ways to scare people away, certain moments when the wet bandits try to break into his house, it shows that he does get scared, and he starts to realize that, okay, it would actually really help if I had my parents with me here. When he hides under the bed, or when he sees Old Man Marley before he figures out the truth about him, no matter how brave you are, everybody's scared of something. And it shows little kids that it's okay to be scared of something. There's no shame in that. Speaking of the wet bandits, Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern are so great in this movie. Their dynamic is so on point. If you were to look at it on paper and realize that the guy from Goodfellas and the other guy from Breaking Away are both going to be partners in crime, basically. It doesn't sound like an ideal situation, but seeing them play off of each other, it's so well realized. And especially with Marv, considering how stupid he is. Something ain't right. Go check it out. Now? No, tomorrow, egghead, now! God! Now. This was the first movie that I ever saw Joe Pesci in. I have to admit, I haven't seen Goodfellas in its entirety, but when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I saw the movie My Cousin Vinny, and it was such a huge shock for me, because I was used to seeing him as Harry from Home Alone. And then when I saw some of his other films, at least in parts basically, like Casino, Goodfellas, or Raging Bull, and I realized just how big of a departure it was for him. And even though it's a family-friendly performance from him, it still entertains me every time. And Daniel Stern as Marv is really hilarious. And like I said, just stupid as they come, but yet in a somewhat very likable way. It's the perfect opposite to Harry, how he easily sets the guy off with just how dumb he is. Sandy, don't visit the funeral homes, little buddy. Why the hell did you take your shoes off? Why the hell are you dressed like a chicken? I'm having a lot of trouble trying to figure out what to say about this because there's so many great scenes in here, such as the aftershave scene. I'm dreaming of a white duck Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
The snow, then
Not to mention the movie made for this movie, Angels with Filthy Souls. Tell you what I'm gonna give you, snakes. I'm gonna give you to the count of 10 to get your ugly, yellow, no good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead. All right, Johnny, I'm sorry. I'm going. 1, 2, 10. Keep the change, you filthy animal. I like how at first Kevin's really scared by that when he first watches it, but then he ultimately decides to use it to scare other people away, like the pizza delivery boy, and then he also uses it against Marv. Which again, as I said, it shows his cleverness. He uses his head to get himself out of these crazy situations that he's in. He doesn't always go under the bed out of fear. He learns that inevitably, he's gonna have to fend for himself in this situation. And some people might call that implausible, saying that kids aren't really that smart. I wouldn't be too sure of that. I don't know any kids who are that smart and clever, but I would guarantee you that they do exist. And I would say that this kid is a prime example, with the best showcase of his cleverness with the exchange that he has with the cashier. Where's your mom? She's in the car. Where's your dad? He's at work. What about your brothers and your sisters? I'm an only child.
Where do you live? I can't tell you that. Why not? Because you're a stranger.
But another thing that gets Kevin really scared is his neighbor, Old Man Marley. I don't remember the actor's name, but the way this movie sets him up to be this really scary, evil guy, which also plays into the film's tone, which is really eerie and very dark, but also has a very good sense of emotion and lightheartedness in there too. Even John Williams' musical score, which, by the way, is incredible. One of his best musical scores that he's ever composed. In fact, the music that's used in the opening has a really good holiday sense to it, but it's also got a very eerie feeling to it all. And even the music that is used when Kevin is setting up the traps. That's probably my favorite musical piece from this movie. Not to mention the music in the opening of the movie. It kind of reminds me of the Harry Potter theme, which he later went on to compose. Oddly enough, Chris Columbus, the director of this film, also went on to direct the first 2 Harry Potter films. Connections? Well, obviously. But back to Old Man Marley. There's this story that Buzz tells Kevin and this other cousin that's in the room with them. Walks up and down the streets. The salt turns the bodies into mummies. Whoa. Mummies. And the first couple of times that Kevin encounters him, he gets really scared and runs away, and inevitably stealing a toothbrush from a pharmacy, which is not a ideal situation to be in. But then it leads to that really great scene in the church where he runs into him by accident. But inevitably this guy decides to go up to him and talk to him and explain his side of the story. And it turns out he's just a really sweet guy. He lives alone, He doesn't talk to his family because of the silly argument that he had with his son a number of years ago, and he won't call his son out of fear that his son's not going to talk to him. But they both encourage each other and help each other realize that family is really important. And that's basically the underlying theme of this movie, where if you really want your family to be away, all right, go ahead, try it out. Did you miss him yet? Old Man Marley decides to go ahead with the chance to reach out to his family and possibly be reunited with his granddaughter who's in the church singing in the choir. And then Kevin gets the courage to set up a booby trap to throw the wet bandits off guard and get them caught by the cops. This is my house. I have to defend it. Meanwhile, over in Paris, after Kevin's family realizes that they left him behind, Kevin's mom, played by Catherine O'Hara, makes it her mission in life to do whatever it takes to get back to Chicago and to make sure her son's okay. Catherine O'Hara is really, really good in this movie, and honestly, one of my favorite on-screen moms in film. She feels so real and so genuine, even though it seems like she's a bit cold and standoffish in the beginning of the movie. Throughout this film, you do get to realize that no, she actually really does love her son, and she'll do whatever it takes, like a true mother would. I had to sell my soul to the devil himself. I am going to get home to my son. And I know for a fact that my own mom, if I or my sister were in trouble like that, my mom would go to the ends of the earth to make sure that we were okay. But inevitably, Catherine O'Hara gets a ride with this jazz band of sorts, led by the late John Candy, who shows up in a special appearance. And man, John Candy, God rest his soul, what a great actor who sadly had passed away way too soon. Uncle Buck, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He's not in there for very long, but he really, really shines here. Polka, 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 polka. Come on, try it, try it, try it. Okay. Then we also see Kevin's family trying to cope with the fact that he's not there, and every one of them except for Buzz and his Uncle Frank. Look what you did, you little jerk! They all seem to really miss him, in their own ways at least. Oh, and this moment with Kevin's mom when she's on the phone.
Somebody pick up.
That's my mom. No exaggeration. But Kevin sets up the booby traps and waits for the wet bandits to show up. And this is the sequence that a lot of people think of when they think of Home Alone. And the timing of the shots, the editing by Chris Columbus, who knows exactly where to put the camera and how exactly to get the right angles when the traps occur, mixed along with the good slapstick humor, to me, it feels just perfect. The many traps that I could think of, like them slipping on the ice on the stairs or Harry touching the hot doorknob. We're not gonna hurt you. No, no. We got some nice presents for you.
What?
You bomb me with one more can, kid, and I'll snap off your cojones and bomb them in motor oil. And then, of course, the moment when Kevin finds his brother's tarantula and puts it on Marv's face. Anybody who's anybody would scream bloody murder if that thing was on your face and wet yourself. I know I would have. So inevitably, Kevin leads them into a trap at his neighbor's house, the Murphys, and it seems like that he's done for until Old Man Marley shows up, hitting both of the guys with the shovel and taking Kevin back to his house. And eventually the wet bandits are arrested. Kevin's mom shows up in a great scene where she's reunited with him, and what I really like about this is even though at first he's really excited to see her, you could tell that he's a little bit upset with her because the last time that they talked, where she said, "You'd be really sad that if you woke up tomorrow morning and you didn't have a family." No, I wouldn't. Well, then say it again. Maybe it'll happen. And she obviously remembered her last conversation with him because she apologizes, and then he ultimately decides, you know what, I'm just happy to see you again. That smile is just irresistible. And then the rest of his family come back and he's reunited, and then he notices outside in the final moments of the movie that Old Man Marley has reunited with his son and his granddaughter. And the music by John Williams in that moment, saying it's emotional doesn't quite cover it. Oh my God. That's probably about all I could say about Home Alone, which is easily in my top favorite Christmas movies and one of my all-time favorite childhood films. I think it's safe to say that in another 30 years, it's still gonna hold up. Even then, even in the next century, it's still gonna hold up. And if you haven't seen it yet, please, please, please give it a try. I promise you, it'll be worth it. So those are my thoughts on Home Alone. What are your guys' thoughts on the movie? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts. Hope you guys are having a really good holiday. Stay tuned for another holiday-themed review, and I'll see you all very soon.